Hi, and welcome to this episode of BIA's Leading Local Insights podcast. I'm John McCoskey, COO of SpectraRep, and I'm joined by Mark O'Brien, President and Founder of SpectraRep. And this episode's a continuation of the conversation around television datacasting that we started earlier this year. So for context, datacasting is using broadcast infrastructure to deliver computer content and IP packets. It's not television, it's data services using the same transmission systems as TV. So Mark, SpectraRep's been around for a long time. When you started this company 20 years ago, did you have an idea and identify what the key use cases for datacasting would be?
Well, we did, of course. That's why we started the company. We saw a huge opportunity. Turns out we were wrong, and we've been wrong a few times along the way. But you know, we're still here. Back then, there was iBlast, there was Geocast, there was SpectraRep. We're still here because we have been very nimble and flexible in the opportunities that we've pursued, and we've found some real good niche opportunities with public safety and a few other things where we did get a lot of traction, and that's why we're still able to tell this story about datacasting.
So it sounds like for much of the history of datacasting with SpectraRep, the key use case that evolved was public safety. I got to believe that's changed a lot over the last 2 decades. What has changed, and what does datacasting look like today as compared to what it was 20 years ago?
Well, it's still public safety, but it's different for public safety, and we've added in public alerting, education, and we see lots of other opportunities, which we'll talk about in a minute here. Back when we really started focusing on public safety, what we were looking for, let me say it this way, we were looking for places where what we could offer was additive and value plus to what they were doing. Back then, it was before LTE, it was before FirstNet, it was before drones even, and even using cell phones. So there was a lot of opportunity to provide a new wireless secure pathway for content. And even as FirstNet came along, LTE evolved, LMR evolved, and some of these other ways of communicating for public safety. Datacasting is still relevant because it's unique. It has unique benefits that those other networks don't have. It doesn't stand alone. It doesn't solve all the problems. It's not two-way. You'll never do voice. But those others aren't one-to-many. Those others don't have typically the coverage that we have. So when we become part of the ecosystem, whether it's for public safety or whatever the use case is, that's where we've gotten traction, and that's I think why it's really remained relevant.
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point that particularly in the public safety use cases, redundancy and multimodal capability is key. So it sounds like datacasting can fit really well into, as you say, that ecosystem.
Well, one of the things that's new in public safety is a concept that started in the military called PACE planning, P-A-C-E. And PACE stands, it's an acronym for making sure you have a primary, an alternate, a contingency, and an emergency way of communicating. You got to have 4 options. And most importantly, those options need to not have shared codependency. So you can't say we're going to use this carrier and as primary and then this other one and then another carrier. Well, if they're all in the same cell tower, everything goes away in your tiered plan when that happens. The nice thing about datacasting, at least as it relates to public safety, is we don't share the same tower, we don't share the same backhaul, we don't share the same spectrum, we don't share the same generators, we don't share anything really with those other networks, and that is a real advantage, especially for public safety who's looking for ways that they can rely on infrastructure that's going to work even if other infrastructure is impacted with congestion, power, severe weather, or whatever it might be.
Right. Well, so I know you've been doing public safety since really the start of the company. But can you talk a little bit about education services using datacasting? Because I know COVID kind of changed things and made datacasting a really interesting opportunity.
Well, that's a perfect example of how I said, when we thought we started the company, we thought we knew what the opportunity was, and we shifted to public safety. Education is another example of there being an opportunity. And I have to give credit to our public television partners. We work with broadcasters of all stripes, but our public television partners were really committed to finding a way to use their resources in datacasting to help kids stuck at home during COVID with no internet. And in fact, it was a great fit. We were able to take everything that we had in place for to serve public safety and adapt that to have teachers be able to get information to their students, just like we would have an EOC getting information to a fireman. It was a great example of taking something that worked for one use case and with a few tweaks, having it really add value in other use cases. And that's, I think, one of the big lessons here is this is, by the way, this all historically has been ATSC 1, which has some limitations compared to ATSC 3. So I think there's this learning about finding where datacasting adds value and in specific use cases, and that same thinking carrying forward into ATSC 3 is going to open up all kinds of new possibilities.
Can you tell me about your latest service, a new use case that SpectraRep is identified and working on?
Yeah, so we still do public safety. We still do education, but education is morphing now that COVID is over, and it's less relevant to connect teachers to kids that don't have internet at home. So we're adapting and changing with those times and morphing the education offer. And then at the same time, there's this new opportunity of public alerting. What better way to distribute an emergency alert message to the public than a one-to-many broadcast? Everyone gets it at exactly the same time. So we're the latest thing that we're working on is, again, another adaptation of the same story where we have technology that provides the ability to deliver IP packets, and then it's just a question of what do you want to put in those IP packets? And we're getting some real traction with public alerting because of the beneficial nature of the pathway that we ride on, which is this powerful broadcast television one-to-many wireless delivery network.
That's great. Well, so you've been doing this datacasting for more than 20 years, long before ATSC 3. How does ATSC 3 change what you're doing with datacasting, and what does it offer to broadcasters?
Well, the big thing about ATSC 3 is it's natively IP. And so datacasting is putting IP packets into ATSC 1 broadcast signals, so that's arguably all IP. But it takes special equipment, it takes special devices. We're kind of shoehorning IP packets into a non-IP delivery network. With ATSC 3, when the core system is all IP, it's now natively comparable to any other and interoperable with any other all IP network. So Wi-Fi, LTE, the internet. I think one of the big wins that we have with ATSC 3 is we can be part of an ecosystem instead of datacasting being a unique pathway to devices. We can be part of an ecosystem of IP packets going into devices. So your tablet, your phone, your car, if it has IP radios in it, with one addition of a tuner chip, we can be part of that ecosystem and infrastructure. And I think the other thing, there's so many advantages of ATSC 3, and a lot of people focus on mobile, which is great, and that opens up automotive and expanding opportunities for public safety and so on. But besides being IP, I think the other really great advantage of ATSC 3 is the flexibility that broadcasters have to fine tune, to dial in, if you will, more robust reception characteristics. So we've already had examples that we've experienced firsthand where we had some challenging reception because of multipath or signal strength, and literally by just adjusting some parameters on the broadcast side, we were able to fix those problems. I mean, that was theoretically supposed to happen, and it did, and that is huge. So imagine in big cities, in between tall buildings in a downtown area, the challenges with reception for ATSC1, and you can, to a very large extent, if not completely, make those go away by adjusting some parameters on the ATSC3 transmit side, which is enormous. So we're compatible with other networks being all IP, and now some of the reception issues, or many or most or all of the reception issues that we've struggled with in the past, can be mitigated. And that's a very, very powerful combination, which opens up possibilities that we're really excited about.
That's great. So let's switch to what this audience is really wondering about. BIA has projected more than $10 billion revenue potential for datacasting with ATSC3 and NextGen TV.
Yeah.
You've explored a number of use cases that have been sticky and done well, but how does this really bring the revenue into television stations? What use cases? What growth? How do we get to that $10 billion or more potential that's been projected?
Yeah, well, let me start by saying that the broadcast business model is more challenging today than it's been in quite some time. Revenue must carry a lot of the programming costs, and a lot of people watching on internet type devices, very, very challenging marketplace. One of the things that ATSC3 and datacasting do, in my opinion, is reopen that door, or open up wider that door to new revenue possibilities that don't exist today, that offset, and to your point, the $10 billion revenue number, exceed a lot of the expectations and a lot of the revenue that is being traded off. And so what are those possibilities? How do we get to $10 billion? Well, if you go back to what I was saying just a few minutes ago, if I were to tell any big company, pick a big company, Google, Amazon, Ford, you name it, and say, look, if we were to build you a nationwide network that had broad coverage of the entire country, all 50 states and territories, that was natively one-to-many, that was all IP, that was capable of delivering your proprietary content, and with encryption, with targeting, with all the things you can do on other IP networks so that you could monetize content, what would you do with that? And I don't think we've fully answered that question, but we have an inkling. ATSC3 opens up opportunities for automotive. How much more cost effective would it be to send traffic data once to every car on the road, as opposed to sending it 10,000 times to 10,000 cars on the road? Precision agriculture, Internet of Things. Imagine if every traffic light could be targeted with a message, or every Internet of Things device's firmware could be updated with one push of content very efficiently and very cost effectively, not to take away from other networks, but to enhance, to be part of the ecosystem with these other networks and bring the advantages of one-way, one-to-many native IP delivery for third parties, which third parties would pay to be able to access. And so I think, just as I was saying that we had to be creative when we heard that schools were shutting down and find a way to adapt to a new opportunity, which turned out to not only solve a huge problem, but be quite lucrative because there was a lot of grant money that was originally intended to go to the carriers to solve remote internet access, which we fully support and hope continues to happen. But that was a 10-year plan, and we were able to come in and say, in 2 weeks, we can solve this problem, and our stations, our partners, were able to tap into those funds that were meant for carriers and use that money to help solve the problem immediately. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think the short answer, although it's not the answer you're looking for, is just as we were flexible in the history to see opportunities and jump into them, we have to be constantly looking, and we are going to find these opportunities with smart cities and Internet of Things and automotive and other use cases that we're talking about. But I really do believe that when we see an opening and we can push our way through that door, it's going to be quite lucrative.
Great. Well, thanks for your insights, Mark. I think we're going to wrap this up. Mark and I will be at key industry events, so if you're there, seek us out, or you can reach out to us directly at info@spectrarep.com or just spectrarep.com for the website. Thanks for joining us. This has been John McCoskey and Mark O'Brien of SpectraRep. Tune in for more BIA podcasts where we bring industry insights straight to you. Got an idea of what you'd like us to cover? Email us at podcast@bia.com. Have a great day.